In this consumer society in which we live, we are taught to function, to consume, and continue consuming mechanically, manipulated with a single purpose: to make money. Now the question is, do we want to continue to be functional in this wicked system? Fill the Void is a concept and a critical thinking community. We seek to raise awareness about the importance of mental and emotional health in our community. Do you feel empty in your day-to-day? Relax, you're not alone. Fill the Void exposes the symptoms of our society. Our Fill the Void ecosystem seeks to inspire a cultural change that generates real well-being so people learn to live more satisfactorily. To showcase how we fill the void in our daily lives, we have developed a series of 8 pills. Each one addresses that void that we feel since the day we are born. Welcome to Fill the Void podcast, where we discuss unhealthy human habits caused by the society of consumption. Well, hi guys. Hi, Ken and Barbie.
Hi.
The most beautiful people in LA. Thank you.
I don't know about that, but yeah, we're up there.
Okay, fine. If you say so.
Yes. Thank you for being here, guys. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to you. So first of all, I want you to tell us a little bit of what you do, what you did, and what was your journey around sex in this case, and your projects. What have you been up to lately?
Sure. Well, I guess this started 3 years ago now, about. We decided to make a career pivot. Both of us were unhappy in our careers, and through our exploration in sex, realized, I've known this for quite a while, but we both have grown so much through our non-monogamy together, and we wanted to generally help either people or couples to explore sex, either within themselves or within their couple dynamic or in their dating lives, and just help people have better, more fulfilling sex lives, which would help them have better relationships, which would help them feel better about themselves.
Because we had also experienced that firsthand, with the navigating of non-monogamy, just what it did for our own confidence and our own sexuality, as well as just like how starting to embrace pleasure can be really healing and just, increase your confidence. So we were kind of started growing as individuals and growing as a couple as we were exploring non-monogamy more. And we were like, look, we have learned and grown so much from this. We would love to help other couples navigate non-monogamy and share the lessons we've learned along the way from it, while also, getting formal sex coach training so that we could officially help couples navigate non-monogamy for the first time and things like that.
So we started going through the certification process to become sex educators. Mm-hmm. And that was also great just for our own knowledge base, but to be able to help people from a formal education aspect and not just like, oh, this is the journey that we went on. And, it really branched out into talking about things that we would not know otherwise, like, people sex with disabilities, people who deal with a variety of different either physical or mental issues and how that affects sex. Also just expanding the knowledge base about pleasure and whatnot. Now, I had no idea. I'd never even heard of the A spot or the P spot. And obviously like the G spot and the clitoris and whatever else, but there are multiple things that you just don't know until you really start researching it or are taught. And so we founded All the Feels, which is our coaching business, and we both take on private clients, whether it's individuals or couples, to help them either, just to explore and spice things up in the bedroom or deal with any sort of issues or hangups that they have. And then we also teach courses online. We have an OnlyFans specifically dedicated to what we call educational porn. It's essentially instructional videos. If you want to know how to pleasure the G spot, or if you want to know
how to squirt
or make a girl squirt,
how to start getting into anal for the first time, the types of things that I feel like we've had conversationally with friends, but there has been no there's a lack of sex education everywhere, but especially in the US. And I remember, as an 18, 19-year-old navigating my new, the new world as an adult and as a sexual being, I was so nervous about giving blowjobs because where do you learn how to give a blowjob? And not everyone watches porn, and often you can learn the wrong lessons from porn, right? It's not actually
not a starting point.
It's not a good starting point, right? It's a lot of it is very performative. So we just were like, these classes would have helped us massively. And we know that if we're just normalizing the conversation around sex and pleasure and education, let's all learn and just embrace our sexuality. And so just like, that's the educational porn side. So we can help obviously with the kind of physical acts, and we're happy to use our own bodies to demonstrate it.
Instead of like a biology diagram.
Instead of a diagram.
It's really hard to be like, how you find the G-spot versus like when you're in front of a real person.
Versus, Ken can be like, okay, so you angle your fingers like this and it's about 2 inches. He could, actually explaining it and demonstrating it on my body and the motions as opposed to diagrams. It's just a lot more relatable. And we also, we use terms like
cock and pussy
and dick, as opposed to
make it
the
relatable,
labia and vaginal tunnel. We're trying to make it just as accessible and easily as understood as possible.
And then just this past year,
6 months,
we were obviously already doing the educational side of it, and we're like, look, if we're already naked on camera having sex, we might as well just fully jump into this and make a name for ourselves, which will then obviously like help show that we are experts in this. So we jumped into mainstream porn, moved to LA, and we're filming out here multiple times a week, and it's been amazing.
I love it.
Really fun, honestly, and also
so much fun. We really love it.
There's so many things that we learned about the industry and how all of it works, and the filming aspect of it. Not to mention all the people in it, which has been the best surprise. They really are
humans.
So much more. And, in the end, we're like, why didn't we expect this? But, a lot of people think that it's either former strippers just doing it for the money, or young, naive people being taken advantage of. And not that doesn't exist, but those are by far the minority. Almost everyone.
There's a lot of stigma around the industry. I also feel, right?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. And it's so much cleaner and safer than people realize, especially after two. It has been cleaned up. These production companies are major corporations. They don't want to have lawsuits on their hands. They don't want to have safety issues or criminal cases on their hands. So it is so much. Almost everyone in it are people in the non-monogamy community. Whether they started off that way or not, or they just got in it that way in porn. But it's people who are very openly sexual and non-apologetic about it, and very vulnerable and supportive, and very happy to meet other people like them that are that open sexually. And it's so warm and welcoming and supportive, and for the most part, so much safer. And I don't know how else to describe it. Like there are those assumptions that this is like dirty and seedy and skeevy and peekaboo being taken advantage of, and like, not that doesn't exist, but that is so small compared to the people who are in it with their eyes wide open and not naive, taken advantage of, and they know exactly what they're doing, and they're making a career for themselves, and they're stacking their money, and I
think it takes I think it takes a certain type of person. I think you mature very quickly in this industry, right? I think you learn a lot of tough lessons pretty early on, and you have to be super resilient and confident, and also confident enough to do a line of work or any sex work in general where there is that stigma, and society is going to throw a lot of shade your way. So there's a lot of very strong, mature, powerful people. And I was so surprised with the females in particular. I was because of the stigma, this assumption that there'd be a lot of bitchy, mean, competitive girls because you're all competing in spots. But actually, it's just been this wonderful, like the non-monogamous community, just this wonderful sisterhood of women uplifting one another, and they're sexually empowered in themselves, so I want other women to be sexually empowered. So I've been so touched and overwhelmed, and I feel so grateful for all these incredible women that I've been that we've both been meeting in the industry that are just incredible humans. And back to the stigma point, like we have to get tested every single 2 weeks. Some people even require tests within 7 days. So if you're not kind of clean and respectful, then you won't work. You know, you can't book a scene without a test. So actually, that's just another way in which the cleanliness and the STDs is another stigma, whereas it is actually just like the non-monogamy community, the rates of STDs are actually lower than people having casual hookups who aren't using
That's what I always say.
Multiple performers like somehow test positive for something. If it's more than one, they shut the entire industry down. So the safety and health and safety aspects of it are way higher. And on every set, you have a consent check with your fellow performers. Some production companies are more thorough than others, and they'll give you like a diagram of what parts do you want touched and how, or
words you don't want
to no list. Or some of them film it to make sure that like everyone's on the same page, and they have a record of it. Some of them it's all just in writing, but it's very, very thorough. You have a full conversation of what you're okay with and what you're not, so everyone knows before each scene starts what the expectations are and what your co-star's boundaries are.
So I actually, it's interesting because like I feel so safe. You know, it's a very safe environment to we talk about a lot to practice potentially certain age play or age dynamics or different kind of slight kinks and role plays and things on a set, because there's usually at least 3 or 4 people. So for me,
and even in like a dom sub or some sort of like age play dynamic, there would be a power dynamic there that's imbalanced, and that usually in your private life would require a ton of trust, and it does. Except that, you know, if I'm the older guy to a younger girl in my private life, you know, that there could be some issues there where I might be able to manipulate her or whatever. Not that I would, but that is always a concern with an older man and a much younger woman. In this case, the director is in charge. I am not.
Exactly.
So that power dynamic doesn't exist. Someone else is in charge, and it's very equitable, and they're making sure that everyone is being respected and all that.
So it's actually a safe environment to almost, explore some of the
and basically it's like a room full of professionals. So I guess that of course it would be way more safer than just a night hookup or anything related to that, where even in the polyamory swingers lifestyle, I always say that it's way more safer than the normal casual sex from a club, even with STDs, protection in sex and all of this. So
absolutely. So that's another cool aspect of it, I think, is exploring. And for me, especially as a woman, where often I haven't felt safe, even in parties, like you were saying, here it's very much I'm empowered to say no or cut. You know, that it's very encouraged to make sure you feel safe at all times. So we feel like safe and looked after, and we're having just a lot of fun with it.
I love to shine light onto all these, like I say sometimes even like symptoms like that, or symptoms in the way where I talk about feeling the void and all the symptoms that arise that nobody even talks about it, because nobody wants to talk about the real things, and we're always covering up, you know, which doesn't make sense, even with sex education. Like, how is it that we don't have a lot of platforms where they explain to have sex in a real way, right? So important.
So important. Okay, in a relationship, and like what, you know,
and that's a lot to do with the world we're in terms of tech having all the power and monitoring conversation, and you know, both our educational Instagram and TikToks got taken down because we've been trying to help educational health information,
we got deplatformed for trying to like
help people.
To me too. I did a pill filled with dicks inside to fill the void, and I wanted to like boost the post. They reject the ads because it says the word dick also, or like all those things.
We even avoided all that. We
even when you're super careful,
like couched all the language and used symbols and whatever, so you wouldn't actually put a full word.
We were so careful with the vocabulary,
and even still,
appeal, just delete it. It's getting harder and harder with the meta crackdowns, and
that's why it's so important to have people like us to shine light. So, tell me a little bit more about your dynamics in your relationship.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, until we met, I was actually engaged to be married 6 years ago. I had my college boyfriend and then my ex-fiance. And so my sexual experience was super, super limited.
That was your entire 20s.
That was my entire 20s, 2 guys, exactly. And I grew up in a very conservative area where, I was about to get married and move to the countryside and have kids and do the thing that I knew.
Yeah.
So it was only really after that breakup, after we didn't get married, that I was really single for the first time and started thinking about what did I want. And I had a few casual hookups for the first time, really. And I was like, this is so fun. And as I was having these casual hookups, I was starting to get more confident because I was like, oh, it's nice to be desired. And I was, with my ex, we didn't have much of a sex life. I was always the one initiating. So when we met, I was very much still in this, I wanted to kind of explore phase. And I said very, right up when we got exclusive, which was very quick because we were really into each other. I was like, I've always wanted to try
having adventurous sex
and having adventurous sex for the first time ever.
I was introducing her to kinks and
he opened my eyes to so much. Yeah.
Everything.
Basically.
all the basics.
I remember one time he was like, try calling me daddy, didn't you say? And I was like,
yeah.
I was like,
eventually.
No. You know what I mean? I was like, all this nervousness. But the more we explored with all of that, with all the kinks and him being dominant, the more I was like, oh my God, I love all of this. And as I was, as we were continuing to explore, I just got so confident and I felt like I was really starting to heal a lot of my wounds from I had sexual trauma at a young age. And it just put into context that I was so shut off from my body my whole life. I didn't experience much pleasure. And I think that was very much intentional, abusing my body, filling the void, right? Was starving myself and just being so shut off from my body. And so I felt like it was so healing to really feel safe with a partner and be able to explore these things together. That safety meant that I could lean into the unknown of kinks and BDSM or whatever it might be.
So maybe we became exclusive after like 2 months of dating. And then maybe a week or two after that, I was making dinner for her and she just said, it's kind of a shame that we're exclusive now because I've always wanted to try being with girls and have a threesome. And I was like, okay.
I was probably tipsy, so I was probably nervous to say that.
Yeah, but I think the fact that we had been exploring up to that point with rough sex and kinks and all sorts of
like I deep throated for the first time.
Yeah, I bought her first sex toys. She had never even had.
Wow, amazing.
Seen porn
I'd
before.
Never watched porn.
She had been spanked once before. That's the only kinky thing she ever did. Literally one spank. And so I think the ramp up of like me introducing her to all these things, she became
open the door to
with sexuality
and talking about it. When having never really talked about sex my whole life, it became just something that we were able to vocalize with one another and talk about openly, which was so freeing.
And so she said this to me, and I was like, okay, well, first of all, just because we're a couple doesn't mean we can't do those things. I would love to do those things with you, but also I heard those as two distinct comments, like you want to try being with girls and you want to try threesomes. So but in both of those scenarios, if you're 29 at the time and think that you might be bi, you owe it to yourself to find out if you're into women. And
exactly.
And I had that whole like angel devil on your shoulder thing where as soon as those words left my mouth, I got like a sick feeling in my stomach, like a nervous feeling. And the right side of my brain was like, what are you doing? You're telling her to go fuck other people. And then the left side of my brain was like, shut up, idiot. This is going to be good for us. This is what you want.
Yes.
And so we talked about it a lot, and I encouraged her to get on dating apps and find a girl that she was comfortable with. And it took about 3 months, and she found someone who's wonderful, who is still a friend of ours, who we still see. Who's an amazing human, and they had a great time. And afterwards, I just said, "Okay, how was it?" She said, "Oh my God, it was great. I'm definitely bi. I love women."
So much that experience, my first time being just alone with a woman on a date and hooking up with a woman. I was like, "Oh my God!" So many things clicked into place. Where I was like, "I love women. I want to do this." Like that was a very
and I've always been, oh, that girl that I thought was cool when I used to live in LA. Turns out I had a crush on her. The Spice Girls. There's a reason I was so into them, and like,
so much clicked into place. And I was like, okay, that was really the start of me being like, okay, I would like to be with women more and incorporate more of this. But I was nervous about him, and I had to work through a lot of jealousy.
Yeah. So the first year, half of us doing this, we only explored together. That was her line. Because I was like, okay, well, would you want to do it again? She was like, yeah, absolutely. And I was like, okay, my only follow-up question is, what am I doing while you're doing that?
But I think that sometimes it's like what you were just saying about like an angel and the devil on your shoulder. I think with the topic of sex as a whole, right, there's so much shaming, like you said, and stigma around sex in general society. And I think we take a lot of that and internalize it, right? And so there's often this conflict between what we want, but then us shaming ourselves for what we want, or feeling.
And there's also the
insecure about
you want to do the things that you want to do, but you're worried about your partner leaving you for someone else.
Yeah.
It's just a security issue, and different people have different attachment styles and abandonment issues and whatever else. And so obviously I wasn't being greedy. I was happy to explore with her, and after a couple months, we found a girl that we were comfortable having a threesome with, and then we tried being with couples and going to parties.
And the more we explored, the more we figured out what we liked, but also that there was a lot that we did like, and we loved being in group parties and threesome.
Really happy with any of the parties we had been invited to. So eventually we're like, you know what? We know a couple great couples. We know a couple great, unicorn single bi girls. Like, why don't we throw a party? And we just had like 5 people at her old apartment, and they were all like attractive and cool. And we had a great time. So then that just started like, okay, let's just do this regularly.
And that's been consistent.
Go on dates with girls and have threesomes.
That's like,
throw sex parties like,
so it's been 3 years, really, 4 years nearly of us throwing sex parties. Roughly. Yeah. So that's been a constant. We figured out like that for us is just something we love, which is like going to a party together, hosting a party, even like together, experiencing it together, and like we love that so much that continues to be
and bringing together and introducing other good people who we've dates with, or that have been to our parties, and
or friends,
being able to connect other people and create a non-monogamy community, really.
And you also learn from like other couples dynamics and how other
absolutely. So I actually reconnected with a couple. My introduction to non-monogamy was from a girl that I was seeing who was married, and this was the year that we were both single before we got together. And I just asked her all tons of questions about like how does this dynamic work, and what are your rules, and how do you and your husband make this work? And so I was able to like see a good working model of a long-term non-monogamous relationship where they make it work, and they're entirely open, and they date separately. And have for like 10 years. And I just reconnected with them like 2 months ago in May, and brought her to a party. They're out here in LA now as well.
Amazing.
Now I've introduced them to our entire crew out here, and they, it's like full circle. Everything's come back. But so I feel very fortunate, and I've thanked them for like showing me an example of how to make that work. Because when we started doing this, I'm like, well, I actually have known people who do this successfully, and it's actually strengthened their relationship instead of hurt it. And so we were doing it together for the first like year and a half, and then we went through a rough patch and decided we would try being fully open. So for about 2.5 years there, we were fully open and dating people separately. We would both see girls on the side. And, for her, she had only been with a girl alone once. And for me, I just felt like I needed that freedom at that time. But we always had periods where like we would change the rules as we go. We were always flexible with it.
That's the most important. Like go adapting to whatever the context you are in is, and adapt your agreements to feel better, right? That's the key, I feel.
And not being so rigid in what your dynamics are, because like when we moved in together, that was a really big step in our relationship, and it triggered for us because we had both lived with our exes, and so that was a time we just wanted to focus on each other and making sure we were good versus like allocating time and money on dates with other people. So I just think that flexibility has been the biggest lesson in terms of being open-minded and putting us first and our relationship first, and honoring where we're at by how we choose to engage with other people. And so there have been several periods where we haven't seen other people, and now it's shifted again.
Or just that the rules changed, or
right?
it started off as a week that we had off, and then we're like, you know what? Why don't we just do it on like an as needed basis?
Yeah, like you trial and error too. What works for you. So to your point, like you pick up insights from how other couples navigate or how other people navigate non-monogamy, and it's also, I think, just trial and error for your personal dynamic, and we've tested out what works for us and what didn't work. Like us trying to always plan date nights on the same night away from each other, we ended up finding that like I was always rushing to fill my night with a date if he had a date, and then I was going on dates when I didn't really have the energy to. So like that didn't work for us, and
or for me, because then I would have to, if she had a date, then I would have to scramble to find a date. Or whatever.
Right? But also now we do porn, like we don't date other people separately because we're constantly filming with other people separately. So it's
we get that aspect there for work. And other than that, we don't date people separately anymore.
So we still just do parties together. We work separately.
Parties or an occasional threesome together. And then other than that, it's just we film separately for work, and like we scratch that itch that way. And it's in a way that it's like professional and safe, because one of her concerns is always like the person catching feelings. And when you ask like for us to explain our relationship dynamic, we don't consider ourselves poly, because the words polyamory mean like multi-love, and we're not looking for love with other people. We haven't had full-blown relationships with other people. We just casually dated. And so that's progressed to the point where now so we consider ourselves either like ethically non-monogamous or just open. Now it's progressed to the point where, instead of like looking for new people to date or see or hook up with, we have this large group, both in New York and in LA, of amazing friends that are super attractive and super cool, and
you could hang out with and not have sex, or you could have sex, and it's
grab drinks or go to dinner.
Beautiful friendships, like first, right? People that you respect and you like enjoy that intimacy with, and it's still a beautiful type of relationship. It's just not like got that love aspect, but it's got that
you
friendship
care about each other, and you are close. And obviously, when it's friends with benefits, like there's a level of intimacy that like other friendships just don't know.
Exactly. It's like another level that you add, like another layer.
A deep friendship, and levels of care and respect and whatnot that, you can't achieve otherwise, but not someone that will like fall in love with. And the great thing too, like, all of these people also understand our relationship dynamic and respect our relationship dynamic, and they're friends, and they would never do anything to like harm our relationship.
Not emotionally, it doesn't make me emotionally nervous about people catching feelings or whatever. It's just it feels just very, like we're accepted for our relationship as we are, and it's the same with all of our friends in this world. Like
really fun and really respectful and caring, and like we feel very lucky to know all the people that we know. And at this point, I would say like all around the world, because we have friends in London now and in Miami, and and it's been the most amazing experience, and it feels like we are being our true selves, because I kind of always knew I was this way. And we're living the lives that we want to live without any fear of judgment or rejection from friends or family. And if anything, like, it's expanded our close friend circle in terms of these amazing, wonderful people.
But I also think it's unique because we started porn together as a couple. So there's this element of, one, keeping each other grounded as we enter this, crazy new world. But two, I think inherently people, it kind of we validate one another. And I think people respect, because we're both performers, people respect our relationship. And so I think I'm, as a girl who's typically more vulnerable in these spaces, I think there's a level of safety that comes with people knowing that my partner is also someone that they might meet or might work with. And so I feel very grateful that people seem to like be respectful of me and us and our relationship as a couple in the industry. I'm very grateful for that safety.
And guys, like looking into your childhood, do you think like, and as growing up as well, did you have moments of struggle where you had to like fill the void and use maybe sex or whatever as a coping mechanism or as a way of escape? Also, like you mentioned, like the body image as a girl, you know, that's like a very typical and classic problem in a lot of women, and nobody talks about it as well. And could you like mention some of these things in your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would say it was definitely filling the, as a teenager especially, I always felt this conflict between wanting to be super sexual and I think filling the void with sex that way, but then, you know, trying to hide it a bit or be secretive about it because it was, you know, because of slut shaming and because of, you know, growing up in a very conservative area, it was almost like I went to boarding school. I had to be, you know, a classy lady. Meanwhile, on the weekends at parties, I was always like desperately trying to like hook up with boys and be very sexual. So I felt like I was definitely, and I struggled with eating disorders. So to your points, and it is especially common in women who have gone through sexual abuse as well. So I think between, you know, my eating disorders and putting so much emphasis on validation and approval from teenage boys, essentially boys my age, I would say I was while I was being shut off from my body, I almost was obsessed with my body being used by men and submitting it to men while also neglecting my body, you know, food and health wise. So I would say I was definitely filling the void that way. Whereas now sex has become a source of empowerment and income, which comes with its own empowerment from it being income. So I would say I definitely was throughout my teenage years and early 20s in that space of almost being sex obsessed, but without the pleasure, more of it just being a thing where I submit to men and get that validation from them and just give my body to them for the taking. So in a way, still quite disassociative, right? Just like not eating, just like
even in your 20s, it's an extension of that, of you avoiding it specifically. And I do think there were still remnants of eating disorders and control issues.
My 20s, probably.
Just control issues in general. That was about you dissociating and separating yourself from your body.
Which is also why I've also always loved getting fucked up, to be honest. You know, I think I have also.
I can relate to everything you're saying. Yeah.
Really?
And I think it happens to a lot of people. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, again, drugs or alcohol, it's just another way to disassociate. Like for me, right, get out of my head, get out of my body, just not think, get messed up, just have a break from everything that goes on in my head. And so it's interesting because part of this, I've been really exploring my own mental health. And, you know, now I don't drink alcohol. I don't smoke nicotine. I don't do any uppers because I've realized that I do have an addictive personality. And I think so much of it has been just disassociating and, you know what I mean? Filling that way. So it's something I continue to monitor, honestly, and continue to kind of check myself.
Yeah. And then as far as I'm concerned, I don't think I've ever used sex in an unhealthy way. I've always had a high sex drive. The difference, I would say, is, and this has been one of the most interesting things about getting into porn, most of us have ADHD.
Almost everyone we work with, it's so pervasive.
It's like a common path.
Some like neurodivergence, people who are either like bipolar or borderline or whatnot. But the ADD thing was interesting to me. But in the end, same thing. Like it makes a lot of sense because hypersexuality is one of the symptoms. You just have more and different dopamine receptors in your brain, and
an intensity and a fix and a stimulation.
You need constant stimulation and higher levels of stimulation. So it makes sense that a lot of people with ADHD have higher sex drives
and borderline
and chase after it a lot more. And so coming across like not just, there are a bunch of people in this industry that have ADHD, realizing like, holy shit, most of us in the industry have it. And so to me, it's not a matter of like filling the void with sex so much as I've realized a lot, especially in the last year, that so much of what I considered my personality and choices that I had made about values that I have and ways that I am are actually just my brain chemistry and trauma responses. And so like almost nothing of who I consider myself to be are actually choices, which is a mindfuck.
Yes.
But it's cool
so
to come
profound.
to that point. Yeah, it's cool to come to that reflection and
we're all
understanding.
just skin bags full of chemicals reacting. And so like, I don't know, from a philosophical big picture perspective, it doesn't surprise me about nature and nurture and whatnot. But when it's you and you realize that like nothing that you consider choices you've made about yourself are actually choices. And so to me, it's been interesting that way, that like, I was always this way. I was always going to be this way. And it's important for me to just embrace it and do it in a healthy way. And for me, it was more about the struggle of, this has always been like one of my biggest passions and how I spend a lot of my time. And, you know, I've always had girlfriends since like preschool and never went through that girls or gross phase. I've always been into women and sex and made a point of getting good at it. And I've always wanted to be a generous lover and good at it. And so to me, it was the struggle of, you know, it's not fair that other people get to monetize their skills and their passions, and I have to worry about social and societal blowback to me. So I just eventually reached a point where I was like, I don't care anymore. I might lose friends or family. I need to do this. And in the end, I've been extremely lucky that I haven't lost anybody in my life. I guess I'm surrounded by very open-minded, supportive people, and you know, they've fully embraced it. Nobody cares. You know, some of them are like, oh God, like an eye roll is the worst that I got. And for the most part, they're like excited for me.
But I also think that's different for men. I've had a couple of girls walk away from me and I've been getting a lot more shame. So
but not anyone who was close to you.
But I mean, people I've grown up with, people I used to work with. Yeah, not like people I call like my closest friends. I've not been hurt that way, but there's been.
But again, like that's the like how we view sex on women and on guys. Like it's cool if a guy fucks 10 girls, but if a girl fucks 10 guys, she's a slut, you know?
Yeah, totally hypocritical and double standards and ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And how do you deal with this need for like stimuli, as we were saying, you know, because that also happened to me. Like, how do you deal nowadays in a healthy way when you're in need of this like high feelings or intensity in emotions? And
therapy for both of us.
Yes.
Yeah. Huge
meditation for both of us, and or just doing things throughout the day that keep you calm and regulate. She does like self-affirmation.
I do affirmations.
Keep yourself in a positive mindset.
Or if I'm feeling an agitation or a need for stimulation, I'll go for a walk now. And now that we're in LA, we're lucky, right? Like I just went on a 2-hour hike by myself on a Friday night. I can walk to the hills. Like we're fortunate that walking has, and actually back when I was in Williamsburg, I used to walk along the water. You know, I think for me, getting out and getting that.
That's what I do here.
You do?
Yeah, I go in the water.
Walk it out. You get some of that energy out. Get some of that stress. You get perspective.
Get in the sunshine, which vitamin D is good for your mood.
Yeah, I try to look at the birds. You try to take in the scenery. Like stop and smell the flowers. Like I find that is a great pause and an assessment of that need, and that pause is so helpful.
But as far as assessing need, also just like gaining self-awareness through therapy and meditation, and just checking in with yourself so that you can notice when like, hey, I'm a little agitated, and that might lead me to chase after whatever, like sex, drugs, you know, chasing highs or whatever, or stimulation or whatever, and just really keeping yourself in check. But I think also like we keep each other in check too, and call each other out about like, hey, you've been agitated or going through like highs and lows. You need to like calm down in general to keep it more even keel. And that takes just like practice through therapy and meditation and like having talks with yourself and checking in to become more self-aware, but also like having a good partner that can also call you out in moments where you are letting it get away from you and not having that pause to reflect and be like, am I getting out of control right now? Or am I going too far with this? Am I getting carried away?
And also over time, I think, with therapy and a lot of these practices, for example, for me, I'm now better able to be like, okay, tonight might be a triggering situation. Like I'm going to be around a lot of people drinking, and there's going to be a lot of older men, for example, where I typically put them on a pedestal and I'm very submissive and flirty.
And they'll be after her.
They'll be very intense. And then I can get myself into, not super safe situations. So I think after years of this type of work and reflection, open communication with each other and with our therapists, I now can be a bit more proactive and be like, okay, so instead of drinking tonight, I'm going to take my lollipops so I have something to hold on to.
Yes.
And I'm prepare that I'm going to prepare how to talk about what I do while also keeping a bit of boundaries and a bit for myself. So I think more and more so I'm able to like proactively prepare for scenarios that could be triggering or substances that could be triggering. And I feel lucky that I now have a good sort of tool set that I can kind of prepare with,
Yeah, exactly. And my last question, guys, it's like, what's your outlook on sex in current times with everything that's happening in the world post-pandemic? And where do you think that all this is going to with AI, technology, like, what's your overview?
Yeah. So one, people need to be having more sex. The I guess catchphrase hookup culture doesn't actually exist. Younger millennials and especially Gen Z are having less sex than any generation before them. So the only way that hookup culture actually means anything is that people are having less long-term relationships, specifically marriage. And for most people who aren't just hooking up constantly or whatever, dating regularly, marriage is the thing that makes sex happen for most people because it's easy access to someone of your preferred gender type or sexuality or whatever. And so with AI and social media and technology and all this, it is separating us in a way. The one positive is there is much more emphasis in younger people on sexual identity,
self-expression,
and so exploring more with masturbation and watching the porn that they like, and there is so much more available. The flip side to that then is they're not necessarily exploring with other people or gaining those long-term relationship skills, which could hurt. But in general, there is a direct correlation between how sexually permissive a society is and lower rates of violence. So, and that's both like within small communities and counties, and then also nations as far as rates of not just like violence and crime, but war.
That's so important.
The real thing is we need to be comfortable with our own sexualities internally and what things you're into, and be okay with that within yourself, and be okay expressing that and seeking that out with other people and allowing people to have that outlet. Because the truth is, the world in general has been way too sexually repressed for way too long. Whether you are monogamous or non-monogamous, that's a choice, and it should be open to everyone. And I think it's wonderful that monogamy is no longer the assumed default. I think that's important.
And more people are dipping their toes into the world of non-monogamy.
Exactly.
Right? Like you can see
every time more.
You can feel that momentum coming, and whether it's online, there's just more people having those conversations. And we've had inbound coaching requests for couples in their 40s trying to navigate non-monogamy for the first time as a married couple.
That's so good.
Or singles trying to date non-monogamously and don't know how to approach that.
They want to intentionally date non-monogamously. So that conversation is definitely on the rise, which is great, because to your point, I think monogamy is now being questioned, and I think people are more likely to find relationship styles that work for them, especially the generation after us who are a bit more sort of self-aware and purposeful with their self-expression and not navigating relationships that work for them. So I think it's a beautiful thing that non-monogamy is certainly on the rise, and I think that's so a testament to the conversations being more normalized. And we've been on this mental health revolution for a while, which is great, with self-love and meditation and prioritizing your mental health, which I think the pandemic really shone a light on even further, right? It definitely started before the pandemic, but certainly in the pandemic, really like, do what you can to help this yourself in this anxious time and everything it's bringing up mentally and how it's been such a difficult time. So I think we've been on this mental health revolution for quite a while now.
And we're now absolutely part of it.
And sexual health is a part of wellness, right? So it really feels like
both
sexual
physical
health
and mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. It really feels like we're at the start of a sexual revolution. That's the next wave from that. We're really excited about. You're seeing these conversations happening more and more, and like we're just so excited. And I think, like you said, it's important for people like us to shine a light on these types of conversations and normalize it and be be part of this collective wave of making it normal, so we feel less shame about sex and everything that comes.
One thing I do want to add also is, you're asking about AI and social media and how those things affect going forward. One of the biggest things that's not being talked about is just economics. So it's a lot harder to hook up with people when you're 26 and still living with your parents.
Exactly.
And that is so much more common now than it's ever been in American history, as far as getting into your mid-20s and still living in a house with your parents and not feeling like you have your own place where you can have sex. And so the sheer economic dating is expensive. If you don't have enough money to live on your own in your own rent and you're still living with your parents, do you have enough money to take girls on dates? Absolutely not. And so especially when we're talking about things like AI that is going to steal a lot of jobs, a lot of different sectors from a lot of people, including good paying white collar jobs, as well as things like anything involving driving and whatever else, manufacturing. So this is a really important conversation to have, that not just technology, but also economics is greatly affecting people's ability to have sex and relationships. And I think it's important for us to address that moving forward, because, if not, you're going to have a continued rise of things like incels and the very toxic manosphere of, violent misogyny that's coming out, a lot of which comes from these feelings of enforced sexual repression, instead of blaming it on greedy billionaires and our ineffective government and corporations just, driving up inflation through pure greed of price inflation, versus feminism is the problem. Women hooking up is the problem. It's like, well, do you want to hook up with them? Like, it seems like you're blaming the wrong.
Yeah, you don't know where to direct.
Yeah. And so I think all of that is extremely important for us to stress moving forward, so that people can have healthy sex lives and healthy relationships.
But with the rise of AI, everyone's like, there's going to be a lot of industries impacted and jobs that will be lost. But I think ultimately there is still going to be a craving for human connection. And one thing we found sex work, right, is like often it's just people lacking intimacy in their own lives. So I'm hopeful.
More so than even physical gratification.
Right. It's intimacy. And so I think I feel hopeful about, the sex industry as a whole, even with the rise. I think there will be more of that desire.
I think it's the biggest industry that will prevail, because it's like the thing that it's real and it cannot be replaced ever by any machine.
Yeah.
Someone that is listening to you, that is real, that has their own feelings, and
versus what you programmed it to react to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for this amazing talk.
Yeah.
Amazing. I hope. Yeah.
I know it was going to get that deep.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I love it.
Because it's you involved.
Yeah. And it'll help so many people. I know it. So thank you. Thank you for everything, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure talking to you.
Yeah.
Always.
You too.
Let's do it soon.